Welcome to Northpointe Plus, episode 151.
Come on now.
That's crazy. Crazy. We are actually coming up right on our third anniversary at the beginning of September, whatever. I'm here with Larry Carter, who spoke this past Sunday, finished our series from 1 Timothy, keeping the main thing the main thing. Mm-hmm. How you doing?
Doing great.
Been working outside?
Yeah, working outside, trimming out our big juniper bushes that have grown to be like 12 feet high, and the bushes go about 50 feet long. And so,
is that what retirement looks like?
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Well, it's just
I'm not looking forward to that.
Well, it's all the projects that I put off
forever.
And now the trunks of the juniper are like 8 inches across. They're huge, and so I chainsaw. Trim out. You have to trim it all out, haul all the stuff away. It's a pain. But
you know there are people you can pay to do that?
Yeah. I heard a long time ago, there was a saying, it said, if you can do it by yourself, then you should do it. No matter no matter if you're wealthy or not, if you can do it by yourself, do it.
That's good advice.
And so I'm doing it by myself. And so I'm just doing it. It was going to be like a 3-month project, but this is like my second week, and I've got three-quarters of it done.
Oh wow, good for you.
But now I have to let the big roots, the big base of it has to die. It doesn't grow back; it'll die, and so then I got to figure out what to do with
That'll be fun.
No, but it makes me really admire the pioneers.
Oh yeah,
how they would clear out a whole forest.
Yep,
with just a saw and some couple of horses.
Craziness. So, you want to kind of do a recap of the message for us?
Sure. It's again, that's Paul's letter to this young preacher.
Yep.
Full of just incredible, deep insights, not only for him but for all of us as far as everyday living and what that should look like. Covering matters of the church, but also in his own personal life. And then toward the end, he gets on the subject of money and possessions and so forth. And it's just such great advice at the end.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting to me that he spends as much time as he does, because most of the 6th chapter all deals with possessions with money and how we should approach it and see it in terms of how it works in our lives.
Yeah. So that's the focus. Really is about that. What is the focus of your life on? Is it on accumulation of material things, or is it on spending time working for God and working for His cause? What is it? Ephesians 2:10 says that we're created in His image and created in Christ Jesus to do good works.
For good works, yeah.
And so that's what our focus should be, and that's what being godly is about: is doing good works.
Yeah.
Is having works of service, or having a servant mentality, not only just with your life and what you do, like if you're going to help your neighbor pull weeds or do something, but also with your money.
Right.
And so I think that's later on, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I think it all goes back to how can I best serve with what I have? How can I best do that?
No matter how much that is.
No matter how much that is.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going.
Yeah, good stuff. At the beginning of the message, we used Kathy Howland's video, her story, which is, I think, just a really fun story.
Oh, it's great story.
And it's just been fun to see how, I loved in the video that she didn't say, okay, I started giving at a completely different level, and all of a sudden I got a check from Publishers Clearinghouse or something like that.
And sometimes that happens.
Yeah, sometimes it does. but she really talked about how her life had changed, that had been one aspect, that in giving that to God at a different level, that things began to be in focus in a different way, which is really cool.
It is very cool.
We actually shot that video. There's about 15 minutes of footage, and that's going to be available on Thursday of this week.
Okay.
At Northpointe's Conversation. So if you want to watch that podcast on Thursday, you can do that. Catch Kathy's whole story. we got a couple of questions and then lots of opportunity to talk about the message. One of them said, not a sermon question, but Maxine's group would like to attend the lunch on the lawn, but they can't walk on the grass. Is there an alternative? And the answer to that is yes. We'll get something set up for you. For anybody who can't be out on the lawn, I think that we're going to try and have a couple of canopies that people can sit on that will be out on the parking lot so that they can stay on solid ground and be good to go.
And you know what I'm glad about that question is that somebody asked it rather than just keep silent and say, well, I don't want to be a bother. But no, it's a joy to have everybody that can be there to be there. And so let us know, and we're going to try to accommodate you to the most we possibly can. So
if that doesn't work, Larry will carry you, each of you, because he's working with juniper trees.
Oh, so. Yes.
Or we could get a little red wagon.
No, I can do the red wagon, but I don't like carrying people.
Yes. Good. We hope you'll come to Lunch on the Lawn. It is on August the 11th, week from this coming Sunday, and that'll be a cool time to just kind of hang out. One of the questions that we have, and this is kind of, you know what, we'll come back to that question in a little bit. You talked about the frug dance.
Yeah, it was the frug.
I was not aware that there was any such thing.
Well, you were raised on just listening to the Christian music all the time, you know, the Gaithers and that kind of stuff. You didn't listen to rock and roll like Sylvia did when she did it. So.
Well, in the 60s, it was that I would have been.
Did you ever hear the frug or the monkey or the swim or the skate?
The swim, I had heard of and remember, but none of the other ones.
Okay, so those were all dances.
Were you a dancer?
Yes, I was.
Oh, wow.
That's right. Yeah, until I became a pastor, and then I had to give that up for Lent. No, I had to give it up as an example. Oh, yeah, I love to dance. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was quite I could cut the rug. All right, never mind.
Wow.
That's an old saying, right?
Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't have.
Yes.
I wouldn't have pictured you.
Did you ever hear the dance called the stroll?
No.
No, see there. Yeah, those are all great.
I've gone on a stroll.
No, those are all good. People watching know what I'm talking about. If they're back in the 60s, those are all 60s dances.
Are you sure that those people who are that old are utilizing this technology? They are. We believe that you are. There we go. So you talked initially about frugality and said that kind of in our current culture, frugality is often seen as a negative thing, not as a positive thing.
Well, by I guess the makers and shakers, because they want you to spend, they don't want you to conserve. As I said, the definition of frugality is being virtuously thrifty.
Yeah.
So that's a positive thing. It's just I was a little being satirical. Is like, you know, it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's not what our culture is asking of us.
Right.
You know, if you're a good American, you're going to spend.
But
it's all about the economy type of thing.
Yeah.
So the frugality is a good thing. It's a positive thing.
I think most people, if they use the term frugal about themselves, they wear it kind of as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah, I'm trying to be frugal. But if somebody uses it about somebody else,
that's good.
it tends to be negative.
Could be.
Is there a difference between frugality and like being a miser or a hoarder?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a disorder. You know, being a hoarder, there's a disorder there. There's some kind of a problem there. But being frugal is just being wise with your resources, right? And conserving where you can, and it depends on what your whole purpose is. And we're going to get into this a little bit later. But what's your focus on in life? Is it mindlessly consuming, or is it being aware of what you're doing? And here's a little thing. I have a cousin named Jim Long. He's an attorney, very wealthy dude. He had his own law firm down in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was on a history trip with him. This is years ago. And we were sharing a room. And
this is a part of the banquet and history group? Or
yes,
no?
Right.
Got it.
Buffet and history trip.
Buffet and history.
Yeah, and so anyway, I was in brushing my teeth in the bathroom, and he goes, "Why do you do that?" I said, "Do what?" He says, "Why do you leave the water running while you brush your teeth?" I went, "I don't think about it." He goes, "You know, it's something simple. turn the water off. You don't need the water running while you're brushing your teeth. I went, now see, that's a little thing,
Yeah.
but it's being aware, and it's true.
Right.
And that's not just being, conserving of water for all mankind, but even in your own personal use. It's just being aware of what you're doing, how you're spending, how you're using the things that you have.
Do you think that that's an expression of stewardship?
Yeah.
Stewardship of life, stewardship of the world,
Yep.
in a way that reflects, in a good way, accurately,
Yeah.
On our faith.
Sure. It's drives me crazy when you're driving down the road and seeing guys flicking cigarette butts out the window. I mean, they have no concern for the environment. They didn't want to have the hassle of cleaning out their cigarette ashtray.
Yeah.
And so they're just going to throw out the window. It's just a total lack of awareness about their, what do you call it, their footprint,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's their footprint on planet Earth. And I think as being good Christians and godly people, we should be concerned about that.
Because God
Yeah.
created the earth and entrusted it to
Yeah,
us.
right.
Let me ask just kind of a bigger question, I guess. When you talk about your grandma,
Yeah.
you talk about her being in her 40s
Yep.
through the Depression. And all of the things, when you think about all of the things that people who were in the Depression experienced and what the result of that was, that it really did kind of create this sense of there was need, for sure. For some, there was fear, I think, of not having.
Right.
So they just used things as much as they could, used it over and over again. And that sometimes maybe resulted in a hoarder kind of a mindset, certainly a saver mindset.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there things that you think, as you look back on history, that created the consumer mindset that we have now?
Well, I think when I think about my parents and my grandparents, they had limited disposable income or discretionary income.
Yeah.
We today, not everybody, obviously, but a large number of people have discretionary funds to do whatever. I told you about, I had one of my professors, younger guy, talk to me one day. This was back in 08, 09 when we had the crash.
Yeah, I remember it.
And he said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." He says, you're an older person. I said, "I know I'm an older person, Matt." And he said, "Are we living through some really bad times economically?" And I said, "Well, let me ask you a question. If your mom and dad really couldn't buy their house till they're probably in their 40s, they had to rent apartments or a townhouse type of thing. You don't fly anywhere. You drive. Your vacations, or you have a pop-up tent trailer. You go to Spring Mill State Park down in southern Indiana. You never go to Disney World. You never go to Disneyland. Maybe you go to an amusement park maybe once a year, once every other year. And that each night you have like spaghetti night at home or pancake night and fish night because it helps to spread out the payments and so forth." And I listed off all things like that. And he said, "Do you think that'd be a hard time?" I said, "Oh, that's incredible." Yeah. I said, that was 1950s for everybody.
Yes.
For everybody. They didn't have that kind of, my dad didn't own his own home till he's 42. He just couldn't afford it. And credit cards weren't really in use in a big way. So it's like, and for Christmas, you had that Christmas card account at the bank. You had a Christmas thing that you had to put money in. And I said, that was everyday living. And it was even more so. And before FDR, I didn't have Social Security.
Right.
So
that's interesting.
You get to retirement age, and then you're really rely on your kids to help you do whatever. So it's this discretionary income that I think that we have, but plus the media we have today, that it's 24/7.
Yeah.
Advertisement about you need this, you need that, and it's that putting that temptation in front of your eyes all the time. I just think, in the 30s they didn't have TV.
Right.
They had radio, but not TV, and they had like the Sears catalog that you could go through and see what you want, type of thing.
Right.
But there wasn't the pressure to buy and consume, I think, that we have today. It's just like an endless cycle of you need this, you need that, you need these incredible tennis shoes that cost $200. When we bought what was it, Jack Taylor All Stars?
Chuck
Taylor All Star
Canvas.
Converse that cost us what, $10?
Yep, absolutely.
Hey, I've gone on, but you know what I'm saying. I think it's a whole different mindset because that's what I told Matt, and what finally he goes, okay, I get it. I said so. It's all relative to your own understanding and perspective. I said for me, yeah, I mean my stock portfolio dropped by 50%, but they tell me it's going to rebound and some other stuff. But I still have discretionary money.
Yeah.
If Judy and I want to go on vacation, we could.
Right.
So that's not really hard times. So.
Yeah, it seems to me that, when you think back about radio programs, even the advertising on radio programs was not like the advertising that's on television.
No.
And people didn't listen to their radio in the same way that they watch TV,
Right.
that it's always on. And I think back to when I was a kid, and the big McDonald's big advertising campaign, "You Deserve a Break Today."
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Was, I think that spoke to the whole media perspective to try and create the need that an advertiser could then fulfill,
Right.
and that creates this kind of consumer mindset.
Yeah.
And for us now, we think in terms of time is money and all that kind of stuff, but we think, oh, you know what? It's just easier to use paper plates and throw them away than it is to wash them.
Yeah.
But if we had a different kind of a mindset where we were trying to conserve,
Right.
it would impact our actions
Yes,
as well.
absolutely. Well, you've been on many mission trips, and you've been on building projects when you're down, and the way they do things. For example, if you're in Mexico, we told the guy, the missionary, hey, we'll rent a cement mixer. No. We mix it on the ground and so forth.
With the shovel by hand.
And he said, here's the difference. He said, in America, you'll spend money to save time.
Yeah.
Here, we spend time to save money.
That's good, yeah.
And so it's a whole different kind of mindset. It's kind of a cool thing. So you mix it,
Yep, I have mixed a great deal of cement by hand.
Mas agua.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, yes.
Absolutely. Let's see. Where were we? So do you think we should reuse everything that we can?
Yeah,
Should we?
I think, again, what we are so quick to do in our mentality, because we do want to do the right thing,
Right.
that we could then go overboard. It's like, we've been this way. Oh man, I've got to go do this now. And I don't think that's what God wants for us. And it shouldn't be an obsession. I just think my grandma did it because that's what she did. It wasn't like an obsession. It wasn't like she had this problem, but it just was, that was her mentality that, well, I can save money by doing this type of thing. So I think wherever you feel at peace about it, but don't feel guilty. I mean, that's the purpose, isn't for you to beat yourself or a brand new kind of legalism type of thing.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about here. It's having an awareness. The two things that we'll be coming back to it is having an attention, be attentive, and then be available. So, but be attentive to what you're doing. Is there ways that we can conserve? Like, for example, turning that water, turn the water off while you're brushing your teeth, and then turn it back on when you're going to spit it out. So anyway.
Yeah, it's if we go back to our conversation a couple of weeks ago about legalism.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about was you get legalistic when you become convicted, and then you demand that everybody else live by your convictions. I do think that there are probably things that the Holy Spirit can convict each of us of.
Absolutely right. It's very good.
And so it's funny because maybe somebody out there has an idea for this, but one of the things I think that would be relatively easy and we just don't do very well here is, we provide bottled water for everybody, but all those bottles go in the trash rather than in recycled container. And if there was a way that we could do that a little bit better, that would be something that we could do to just take care of things and reuse that, whatever. You mentioned in there just kind of a side comment in the message about living paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people who live paycheck to paycheck. How do you get out of that cycle? Any quick and easy 3-minute ideas for how you get out of the paycheck to paycheck cycle?
Now, this might sound weird, but if you're not tithing, start tithing. God blesses that. God blesses you in ways that you just cannot imagine. And my wife's and I, our experience together as a couple, it's been amazing how when you sit down and you figure out your expenses and everything else, you say, there's no way we can afford to tithe. But you do, and I'm telling you, you can't explain it. But somehow, God makes it work. God will bless you for that. And what's that old saying that do you want 100% of what God doesn't bless or 90% of what God will bless?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like there's a truth to that.
Yeah. Do you think you can do more with 100% than God can do with 90%?
That's right. And so to me, that's number one. That's the beginning. But
pause just for a second. Yeah. Pause just for a second. Because seriously, you believe if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that if you tithe, that really is the first step?
Yes, absolutely. There is absolutely no question in my mind, because you need to give that to God. Now, you didn't want a story about how God blesses. My older brother, John, he and his wife, Donna, he was just starting in ministry, really young guy, but he felt, I need to lead tithing. I need to be a tither. I'm the preacher of this church. It came at the end of the week. They had no groceries, and they had to make a choice between buying groceries for the family or the tithe. And they tithed. They made a conscious decision to do that. That Sunday, and I'm really abbreviating the story, that Sunday, 2 older ladies in the church, widow ladies, came up and said, we were praying this week, and these are separate ladies. So we were praying this week, and God just put on my heart that I needed to give you something. And in an envelope was a check. And this other lady came up and did the same thing, and it was twice the amount that they tithed.
Wow.
That very Sunday.
They gave that money on that Sunday.
On that Sunday, and at the end of the service, those 2 ladies came up and said, we just felt led separately. They didn't come up together. Said, we just felt led. God wanted us to do this for you. So I'm just saying what I'm saying. And now that taught John a lesson, and John said, we never missed from then on, because God's going to provide. You know, we do what we should for God, and God is going to provide, and that is a huge deal. Now, I think, again, you need to do what you can do. I had one person come up to me yesterday afternoon and say, well, I'm one of those between 35,000 and 50,000, right?
Yep.
And how do you do what you're saying? And I said, you do as God leads you. And I said, what did I say? The second thing was be available. It's what can I do?
Right.
So maybe you can't do this, but you can do this. And there's a start to that. And so you take a step of faith and you do this and you see. And when I said that, he said, yeah, whenever I've done that, God's blessed me. I said, okay. You know, and that's exactly what happens, and God blesses. But on a more practical note, and I'm not a financial planner and so forth, but I think, again, it's really being aware of your resources, and maybe not have that nice car that you have or the latest phone with all the gizmos on it. Maybe those are wants, not needs. And so what are the things that you really need versus what you're wanting to have in your own life?
How do you know the difference between a want and a need?
Well, I think that's like you sit down and say, well, we need electricity. You know, we need water. So what are those basic needs? I need food. I need shelter. So I think it's the basic things that we need in life is what we need, right? Yeah. It's so basic things. And then everything else, it lines up with the want category. Well, what do I want? And I think that when we make those decisions, did you ever know a guy named Ray Fuller?
Yeah.
Okay, Ray and
He
Lillian.
just passed.
Oh, he did. I didn't
He
know
just
this.
passed.
I hadn't heard this.
Yeah, sometime in the last 2 weeks. Yep.
I did not know that. Well,
Yeah.
Ray, he was an elder.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
So, this is personal stuff in the life of Larry and Rick.
Yeah.
Dr. Fuller
Oh, that's right. I do.
was a friend of my parents.
That's right.
And a graduate of the Ohio State University.
That's right.
But he was a friend, and so he and his wife were friends with my mom and dad. When I was in ministry out in Maryland, this guy came to church, Steve Fuller, and his wife Nancy, who was one of Ray's sons.
That's right.
And so we were a part of the church together in Maryland.
That's right.
And I just saw on Steve's son Jeff's post
did not know
that
that.
Dr.
He
Fuller
passed away.
died. Yeah.
He was late
Great.
90s.
Yeah.
He was a heart doctor,
Uh-huh.
and he was Gerald Ford's personal physician.
Yep.
So it was interesting having an Ohio State grad work on Gerald Ford, University of Michigan.
Michigan.
Guy, so he
Michigan
trusted him.
guy, yeah.
Anyway, he was not the premier heart. I mean, he was head of Michigan Heart when he was in his heyday, and made tons of money. But he and Lillian decided that they would live in their same house, which was a modest ranch-style house in a middle-class neighborhood, and not buy the big house, in Ottawa Hills or anything, or on Forest Hills or anything else, but just keep there in their same neighborhood that they raise their kids in, right?
Yeah.
And they'd never buy a car that's better than a Buick. They limited to that. Lillian bought all her clothes at Goodwill.
Wow.
She's the wife of the head heart doctor in the state of Michigan, and she bought all her clothes from Goodwill. I'm telling you the gospel truth. And you know why? They lived on like about 20% and gave all the rest to the church and to missions.
Wow.
And so there's a huge difference when you start really listing down what are my wants and what are our needs. What do we really need to have? Like we need childcare.
Yeah.
So there's some real needs, genuine needs. But I don't think it's going to be that hard once you sit down and really start thinking about these things.
Yeah, I do think that you have to be honest with yourself when you make that list, because there are times that we rationalize and say, oh, absolutely, this is a need.
Yeah.
When in reality, it may not be a need. It may be a want, to have this or that or whatever it is. But I think you go there. And if you get back to the whole question of how do you keep from living paycheck to paycheck, after the tithe step, I think the next step is spend less than you make. You can never save until you spend less than you make. And then you take whatever that is, a little bit, set it aside, that you don't buy things on credit. That's a real practical step. And you just say, you know what, this couch that's 30 years old, we can still sit in it.
That's right.
And one of the things I think when God blesses in different ways, but I always said our house until I think that we moved here. Our couch that we have in our house now that's 10 years old is the first big piece of furniture that we bought in our married life. It was always stuff that was either given to us or that we found out about and got secondhand. And you know what? It worked just fine. So some practical stuff relative to money. Let's see.
The other thing I put down a note here about wants and needs and about hanging up. I think hanging up saran wrap. I think there needs just to be a balance. Is there a balance in my life? And then also taking baby steps.
Right.
And it's not, don't do everything all at once, but just have an awareness and do baby steps. For example, like me turning off the water. When I was brushing my teeth. It's one of those things, just being aware that what is that? What do they call it? My carbon footprint.
Yep.
What am I doing? How am I helping my fellow man and honoring God in the process? Right.
Yes, it's funny. Deb started doing this a while ago, and it has really gone even kind of to another level. But we eat our leftovers.
Yep.
We always have leftovers. Oftentimes they're in a Ziploc bag,
Yep.
and when that Ziploc bag is empty, we tend to just rinse it out or whatever, and then put it under the sink for the next time that we need a Ziploc that's not a food thing.
Yes, right.
So
Right.
like
Exactly right.
if you have an oily
Sure.
rag or whatever
Right.
that you want to put something in, you've got something that you can use again. It's little, what does that save? 7 cents? Yeah, but it does.
Yep.
It's economic. It's a good thing.
Yep.
And then even the step beyond that, that Deb just started a couple of years ago, she bought some Ziplocs that are heavy plastic that can be washed. And so we use those.
That's great.
Multiple times all the time, and don't have to buy as many of those supplies.
Right.
Costs a little bit more upfront, but ultimately it's going to pay for itself, which is a kind of a cool thing. I think there are lots of things that we can think creatively to do.
Exactly right.
This fun thing. I talked to somebody in between services, and maybe it was after the first service, and this is a lady whose granddaughter comes to church with them, which is cool, a 10-year-old granddaughter. And she said that on the way to church yesterday morning, her 10-year-old granddaughter said to her, "Grandma, if money wasn't an issue, what would you do with your life? What job would you have if money wasn't a factor?"
Yeah, that's good.
And the grandma's talking to me about it and just said, "Man, it's clear God's speaking when the message was what it was."
Yeah, that's great.
To really think through, okay, what is it that God has called us to do? What is it that we really need? All those kinds of things, and that a 10-year-old is thinking through. Money is not the measure of.
That's right.
That's not the standard, which is really kind of fun.
That's great.
Godliness with contentment. Paul says to Timothy, godliness with contentment is great gain.
Yeah.
What does that look like? I know that's kind of the whole message, but can you be godly and not be content? Can you be content and not be godly? How do those two things match together?
I think part of contentment is having peace. Mm-hmm. It's having an inner peace about your life and your future, no matter what comes your way.
Yeah.
And so contentment carries with it the idea that, it's a beautiful sunny day. I'm sitting here on a chair next to a beach. I'm watching the ocean come in. I'm content, type of deal. I think that's a limited view of contentment. I think it's this inner peace that you have you could have a peace about your life even when things are not going well, that your life is in God's hands. And that when godliness to me means ultimately my life is in God's hands.
Yeah.
I am trusting God and his goodness to me that somehow, when they say, "Hey, it's going to be okay." It's yes.
Yeah.
Things are maybe tough and horrible, or you're broke, or you can't do this or that, and your neighbor's going to go to Florida for the winter, but there's no way you could afford to have two places and so forth. It's not being then jealous, or it just go, you know what, God has taken care of me. I've been blessed, what I have, my health, or any number of different things. But to me, that contentment carries the idea of this inner peace that that no matter if the stock market collapses, no matter what happens, I'm in God's hands.
Yeah.
And that God is going to provide for me and take care of me. And I kind of intimated a little bit in the sermon yesterday, not a little bit, I did a lot, talking about trusting and relying and depending on God.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work.
Yes.
It's something you learn. I think that's what Paul was saying. You have to learn it. And that's like, okay, I'm going to trust you with this, God. And then, okay, he did that. Okay, he helped me through it. I can feel that. I know he did. I'm going to trust you with this. And then you learn to trust him because God is reliable and he will come through for you. So anyway, you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so this contentment idea, it's like, I just had a big Thanksgiving meal, I can't have any more. I'm full, that I think it's more the idea of this residing, permanent peace that does not go away. It's this sense that God's got this thing. That's how I view.
Yeah, it really is that picture. We were talking just a little bit ago about, do we think that we can do more with 100% that we can control than God than we can do with 90% that God's in control of?
That's right.
And likewise, I think we often think, I'm in a better place that I determine what's safe and secure, rather than being in the hand of God, even in the midst of a storm, and recognizing that if I'm in God's hand, even in the midst of the storm, that's a better place than being outside of God's hand in a place that I think is better. Ultimately, it's always going to be better to be there, and I think that's
and the word ultimately is it, because one thing I'm really bad at is waiting on anything, and to wait on God is similar to my expression about depending on God.
Yeah.
Whew, it's just like I said, God comes through at a minute to midnight when he could have gave me the same answer at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I had enjoyed my night. But that's not, in my life, that's not how God's work. God likes to hold off till about, because he knows I have a problem with waiting.
Yeah.
And I have to trust him more. And to me, my picture of hell is an endless line.
A queue
waiting to get on a ride at Disney World or something. That is my idea of hell. Oh my gosh, I hate that worse than anything. And so anyway, you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this waiting on God is hard. Depending on God is hard. But that's part of the godliness, I think, is trusting that God does love me as much as the Bible says he does. And he ultimately, all things work together for good for those that love God, called according to his purpose.
I think that our trust in God would not be as great. We would not learn that lesson of trust as clearly if he provided at 5 o'clock than he does it 5 till midnight.
I don't know. I kind of would have liked that.
But the lessons actually, Diane Adams wrote about that. She said, I learned that I was not quiet enough in my heart to hear God's voice until late in the evening, until 5 till 12. If I don't listen and look to his voice, God will provide a circumstance that will be more uncomfortable. But he's gracious and merciful and loves me beyond my understanding.
That's right. Amen to that.
Good stuff.
Amen.
Good stuff. Paul wrote to Timothy and he said, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. That was in the passage that we read yesterday. But typically, we tend to hear money is the root of all kinds of evil,
and that's wrong.
Yeah. What's the difference between the two of those?
What's the focus of your life? What you love. If you love money, then that really tells you a lot. I had a friend named Rusty McClure. I think I've told you about him. He's the grandson of the Crosley brothers. They own the Reds.
Crosley Field,
Crosley Field and Crosley Automobile and Crosley Radios and all that.
That's all Cincinnati stuff.
That's right. His uncle was Powell, and I forget, Lewis. His grandpa was Lewis. He was the brother. And just fabulously wealthy. I mean, they are some of the most wealthy men in the 30s and 40s and 50s of anybody in America. Well, he's the grandson, all right? He's a wealthy dude, millionaire. He was asking me one day, he's a friend of mine, and he was asking me one day, he said, what would you do if you had $1 million? Well, he said, did you ever want to be a millionaire? I said, sure, I could be a millionaire. Well, what would you do with $1 million? And I said, well, 100,000 of it would go right to the church. And he goes, what? I said, yeah. And I said, probably set up an account for my grandkids for college or anything like that, or and being aware of mission needs and so forth. And he said, well, you no longer be a millionaire. I said, well, what's the purpose of being a millionaire? And he couldn't answer me. Because his status
Was
how he
defined.
thought of himself is being a millionaire. Okay, he's a multimillionaire, but is having $1 million. To me, the focus is, what could I do with $1 million?
Right.
That's the difference between
Right.
loving of money for money's sake, or what can I use as a servant of God? What can I use? How can I use this to God's glory? Right?
Yeah. I think that when you love money, the means that you'll go to get money
Yeah.
or to control it
Yeah.
takes us away from the godliness that we
Yeah.
were just talking about.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's the root that
Yeah.
drives us away from God.
Well, do you remember Jim Conway wrote a book called Men in Midlife Crisis?
Uh-uh.
Yeah, that's because you're not midlife yet, probably. Not.
I'm not.
But
I'm
Men
not
in Midlife Crisis. Your best. Well, this is back in probably 70s when I was in 80s, coming to my midlife. All right. Anyway, he interviews this guy, and this guy is a dentist. All right, and it's kind of a cool thing. He's a dentist, and he says to Conway, he goes, "You know what gets me?" He said, "What right did a 19-year-old kid have to decide my whole future to be a dentist? I hate my life now." So what he's saying is, when he was 19, his goal was to make a lot of money. And what was the easiest way to do that in his mind, rather than be this kind of doctor? That was going to dental school. And he said, what right did a 19-year-old have to decide that money was the object of my life? And he said, I spent 8 hours a day looking at people's mouths. I hate my job. I hate my life.
Wow.
See, when that's what I think Paul's getting at here is, when your focus is on money, then that will lead you to make decisions that really it doesn't match up with your whole purpose in life, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a really poignant statement by this guy that realized this, and he's in his 40s now.
Yeah.
And he hated his life. And so it's, but you make those choices early on about, okay, what is it? You've heard it. Keith is gone. Greg Stauffer's dad. Greg was going to school to be an engineer because his dad was an engineer. And he came home and he said, he went to like some kind of a Christian rally, came home and told his dad, I think God's calling me to ministry. And his dad, who's a great Christian man and an elder in the church, said, heaven forbid, you can't make any money being a preacher. That's what he said. That's the quote. And Greg said, you're kidding me. That's what this is all about. And his dad really was insisting that you can't go into ministry. You can't be a missionary. You can't make any money doing those things. Well, now, Greg went ahead and became an ordained minister.
Yeah.
And his life's been blessed. But even the spiritual, godly elder of a church says money should be the priority over serving God for your life.
Yeah.
And that's the ruination, or this, what Paul says, that leads you to ruin.
Yeah.
That mindset is sick. It really is sick. Then how many parents are encouraging their kids to take steps? And I'm just because I'm a Bible college, ex-Bible college president, but you can't go to a Bible college. What good is that degree? Well, how about the Christian formation in this person's life that's going to change them forever if it's 1 or 2 years? And plus, they can take basic education classes there.
Yeah.
But no, you need to go to this school so you can have that career. And why? Ultimately, the reason why, because you can make a lot of money.
Right.
And a lot of Christians think that way.
Stop it.
Come on now.
Don't think that way. Really,
I'm almost from Kentucky. I say, bless your heart. That's what I can say, bless your heart. That makes it okay.
You talked about attentiveness and availability.
Yes, right.
How do you decide what to give to?
Well,
Because there are lots of needs.
Sure there is.
Do you? So here's my question: as a former Bible college president, do you give first to the things that you care most about? Do you give first to the church on principle? Do you give first to the things that you're directly involved in? How do you decide?
Well, in my understanding, and again, this isn't a thus saith the Lord. I think that our first responsibility is to the church, because that is, if I'm a part of a congregation at church, I think the teachings that are in the Bible are even going back to the temple with the Old Testament, that you needed to tithe to the temple, and you need to tithe to the church. Now, a tithe you need to give
Right.
to the church. So I think very much so. The first responsibility is to the church. Here's the problem that I've had in my ministry, is that people give to the church when things are going their way.
At church.
At church.
Yeah.
And they're doing the things they want the church to do. When the church starts not doing what, then they withhold their check. It's like there's strings attached. I'll be a generous giver as long as you do the things I want. And if you don't do it, then I'm going to withhold my check, and I'm going to give it someplace else. And that's probably never happened in your ministry, has it?
Actually, I've got a really vivid story that in one of my ministries, the lead pastor was fired, and there was a huge contingent of people that were really unhappy about that. And the way that they dealt with it was that they stopped giving, and the giving in the church actually, numbers didn't change, people didn't leave, but they just quit giving, and the giving was cut in half.
Yeah.
And it ultimately impacted the ability of the church to move forward,
Right.
because that was
Yeah.
the people didn't like it, and so they took their money and ran.
Yeah. We give to God.
Right.
And I understand there's a practicality here that you have bills to pay, the light bill and a new air conditioner unit and so forth. But I think we really lead a church down the wrong path when we say it's really not an act of worship. And I've heard churches do that. Not here, but I've heard it where it's, hey, we need this because we have to pay for this and that. That's not what giving is in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's an act of worship to God. It's an act of trust that I'm going to do without this money, and I'm going to give it to you, God, because this is what everything I have comes from you.
Yeah.
And it's an act of worship.
Right.
That's what it is, not to pay bills.
Right.
And so, or not to be used politically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It is hard because we live in a time where there are lots of ministries. Yeah. There are lots of opportunities.
Yeah. Well, that's the second thing I was going to say about that.
Yeah.
Because you asked the question about that. Like for me, it's many times it's circumstantial, and it's God ordained or God designed circumstances that you come in contact with somebody and your heart is strangely moved by it.
Yeah.
And so that's when you go, God, are you really telling me that maybe I need to be giving in this? For example, here's a prime example just happened in my life. I was been a big part of this one mission organization, but I've just felt God moving me away from there, that who I was and what I was doing really wasn't needed. And yet here's this other one that really is needful of my influence and money and time. And so I closed it off with that and went here. I just felt led by the Holy Spirit to go do that. And I think if you really talk to God about it, it will be a heart thing. First of all, there's a real drawing to it that you're really touched by it, and you think, what can I do then? How can I really help in that? And so I think you just trust God that He's going to lead you to where, and you're just going to be touched.
Yeah.
And it's being attentive, and then being available and saying, okay, what can I do?
And recognizing that being available oftentimes means that we reorganize our priorities.
Yeah.
So I think back to when we were in Kenya, a conversation that we had. You know, we're seeing all these kids in Shumani that we've helped build this church for this community. The kids are going to school, and one of the people who was on the trip, one of the Northpointers, said, I'm already supporting a kid. Several of our people said that, but said, you know, when it really comes down to it, to supporting a child through Missions of Hope is about $500 a year.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a ton when you start thinking about, a check for $40 a month for everybody. But then you think $500.
Yeah.
For some people, $500 is an incredible stretch.
Yeah.
but for many of us, we have the discretionary income to be able to do that. And so there really is a challenge that's there.
But here, one more thing. I know we're running out of time, right?
I'm checking to see.
Okay.
Thank you for hanging on with us.
Okay. I would say if money's not available, then your time and effort.
Yeah.
My brother Jerry's is retired. His wife just retired, and they're both professional people. They live in a suburb of Wyoming.
Yeah.
Very upscale and
Outside Cincinnati.
yeah, they're beautiful, beautiful neighborhood. Right next across the railroad tracks is Lockland, which is not. It's very, very much a lower socioeconomic area. Well, they found out that a whole bunch of refugees from Mauritania, which is a West Africa nation, they've been coming into Cincinnati and into Lockland, and they needed help in this food kitchen and service area. And so every Friday, Jerry and Nancy go over and help stock shelves, and if they need them to cook meals, but they go over and spend like 3 hours. And that's an idea. That's what we're talking about.
Yep.
It's like, okay, so be attentive. And they were, and now, okay, we're available now. We can go over and do that.
Yeah.
And we can help serve these people. And many of these are Muslim people.
Yeah.
And so it's like we're showing them a love of Christ by doing this. So so it's not just about money.
Yeah.
It's having this servant mentality that I am here to serve. Just like Jesus came to serve, I am here to serve.
Yeah.
So how can I serve with my money? How can I serve with my time? And having that kind of a mentality, I think, is really what we're talking about here.
Yeah. As we close, let me just say I was interested in the figure that you used, so I was doing some fact checking.
Okay.
Yesterday, and that $35,000 figure, anybody with income more than $35,000 is in the top. What was it? 1% of annual income in the world.
Right.
Another interesting statistic that I found in that was that the mean annual income, so 50% or higher, 50% or lower, is $10,000. The median household income is worldwide is $10,000.
Wow.
So if you make $200 a week, so that's even like a high school kid, 16 hours at $12 an hour, you're making more than half of the world's population.
That's crazy.
And I say that, again, not to make anybody have any sense of guilt, but to just recognize that God has entrusted us with lots of resources.
With that big box of cereal.
With that big box of cereal. Hey, thanks for sticking with us.
Yes.
And my hope is that the with all of our podcasts, all of our messages, that you really pray and say, God, what do you want me to do with this? Right. And so thanks.
Yep,
thanks for speaking.
Yep.
Thanks for speaking from God's word. And hey, one just real practical thing that you can know about if you're watching this week, this coming Sunday is our benevolence offering that we do 4 times a year. Haven't done one for a while. And I just want to plant that seed so that if you're thinking ahead and want to be ready to give to the Benevolence Fund, that's a fund that's used to help meet the needs of people no matter what's going on that are right here in our area. So thanks for watching, share, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next week on Northpointe Plus.